Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. And we are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hello, everyone. Howdy there, you porcupines, you. This is your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey, coming to you from a slightly different environment than I usually am. I am traveling this week, and I'm actually coming to you. I'm here in Austin, Texas, broadcasting from the office of Young Americans for Liberty. Fun fact, this studio that I'm in right now is where I used to record my daily podcast when I was the senior spokesperson for Young Americans for Liberty several years ago. And that show was called Free America Now. And it's nice to be back, actually. It's nice to see some faces, new and old, here at Young Americans for Liberty. If you aren't familiar, they are one of the premier liberty organizations in the country. Mobilizing liberty activists to go out and knock doors to help liberty candidates win election to state legislatures around the country, including the state of New Hampshire. They've been a real great presence on the ground, and certainly played a big role in the election victories that liberty candidates saw the last few days. So, of course, if you're watching the video version, I am in Texas, the Lone Star State. Thus the cowboy hat. But I will note that Texas is a lovely state, great people. But if you look on the Freedom in the 50 States Index, New Hampshire, of course, we all know is the number one state for freedom in America. Can you guess where Texas is? Number 17. You would think for their reputation, they would be higher up in the list. And you know what? To be honest, they're fairly good on economic freedom, but a lot of those personal freedoms, they're just not so great at. No, New Hampshire is number one for a reason, the freest state in America. But while I'm down here, I came down for a conference that I was at this past weekend. I'm sticking around because of a podcast I'm recording on Friday. Keep eyes out for that. I won't mention the name yet, but I'm sure we'll be posting that on our social media in the near future. And in between things, I figured I would visit with some good folks, and including sit down with a few potential donors, trying to invest in some of the programs that we are looking to launch in the new year for the Free State Project. And by the way, I do want to say thank you. The day after Election Day, we invited a few select folks who are contributors to the Free State Project to come out for a dinner where we pitch some new programs we're looking to start. We're calling it our Granite Gulch Initiative, kind of like Galt's Gulch from Atlas Shrugged, when folks like Francisco d'Anconia and Ragnar and John Galt went out scouting for some of the best and brightest builders to come and join them in Galt's Gulch to build their free society. Well, of course, that's what we're looking to do in the new year. We are going to be recruiting some of the best and brightest liberty minds and influencers and activists and business builders. We're going to be out there identifying and scouting some of the best people and working to bring them to join us in New Hampshire. That's a big part of the Granite Gulch Initiative, recruiting more builders for New Hampshire, and also growing our community and doing more quality content, just like this program here, to help brand the Free State in the minds of everyone who operates within the libertarian diaspora around this country. I want every libertarian in America, nay, every libertarian in the world, to know that the Liberty homeland is the live free or die state, is the Granite State, the Granite Gulch, New Hampshire. And if you would like to support these programs that we are starting, I will tell you that we have a very generous donor who has pledged to match everything we raise dollar for dollar from now until the end of the year, up to $100,000 until December 31st. It's a great opportunity. We really appreciate this donor coming through in this way. And if you would like to contribute, now is the time. Every dollar you donate will be doubled. So $5 is worth 10, $10 is worth 20, 50 is worth 100, and so on and so forth. You can do that at fsp.org. Make your most generous contribution. Everything you donate is tax deductible because we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and it is greatly appreciated. Help us build the Liberty Homeland at fsp.org. And while you're there, be sure to check out our community calendar because, as you know, we have wonderful Free State events that are happening almost every single day in New Hampshire. So if you're in New Hampshire, if you have the privilege of being there, whether you live there full time or you're just visiting for a little bit, be sure to come out and meet the community and check out our wonderful, wonderful events. Yeah. All right. Those are my updates. Let me now tell you a little bit about our guest who's going to be coming on. First of all, I want to say I really appreciated last week. We had a great conversation with Jack Hunter on what just happened. And I will say that our conversation on what just happened with Jack Hunter, he's more of a national commentator on the Liberty movement. And so we focused a lot on what just happened in the presidential race and the U.S. Congress and U.S. House and the rise and fall of the neoconservatives. And we touched a little bit on what happened in New Hampshire. But of course, with the Free State Project, we're mostly concerned about what happens in New Hampshire. Whatever happens in Washington, D.C., we are not planning on anyone in that nation's capital, that imperial city, coming in on a white horse and saving us from tyrannical government. We just don't expect it to happen. It'd be nice if things got better. I'm not counting on it. But what I am very happy about is how many victories are being racked up in state capitals across the country with Liberty candidates getting elected. I know I was just talking with folks here at Young Americans for Liberty. They have over 420 confirmed victories this year of new members of their Hazlitt coalition, their Liberty legislator coalition across the country. And the biggest concentration of legislators that have gotten elected is, of course, in the free state of New Hampshire, where we have, according to our friends at the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, 98 Liberty legislators now, including 5 in the Senate. And so we're going to be talking about that today with a good friend I've gotten to know during my transition to New Hampshire. By the way, last week New Hampshire, I resigned my Maine Senate seat. I am now a voting citizen of the state of New Hampshire. I've completed my move, and we're going to be talking with Representative Michael Granger, who, among other things, he is a state representative. He's a Liberty legislator. He represents part of Rochester, Milton, and also Milton Mills, which I'm told is part of Milton, but they have a separate post office. So it's important to differentiate. He's also the political director of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, which is a great organization. Actually, you can watch our past episode with Melissa Cream. She's the chairman of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance, and they do great work lobbying the legislature for liberty issues. So we're going to be doing a quick rundown with him on what just happened in New Hampshire. So let's welcome to the program Representative Michael Granger.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, Michael?
Oh, not too bad. I'm doing pretty good.
All right. So my first question for you is cowboy hat or no cowboy hat? What do you say?
Well, when in Rome. When the Romans do. I think if you're in Texas, you should wear the cowboy hat.
All right. So we'll be keeping this on for the rest of the episode. Yeah, I kind of like it. And there's a funny story on how I got this cowboy hat. I'll tell you another time. I'll leave the audience guessing on what it was. This wasn't just like I walked into a store and bought a cowboy hat. I came upon it through a more interesting story. But I'll let folks, if you catch me, anyone who's watching, if you catch me at an event and you want to ask me how I came by this cowboy hat, I'll give you the story. Otherwise, I'll just leave you wondering. But anyway, Representative Granger, welcome to the show. And first of all, before we get into kind of what happened on Tuesday, which was an amazing night for those who love liberty in the state of New Hampshire, let's kind of get a little bit more background on you and how many terms you've been serving in the New Hampshire House of Representatives, and how did you get involved politically, and why did you run in the first place?
The reason I got involved in the first place was because after redistricting, there was more than one seat in the town in which I live. And so this is going to be my second term in the New Hampshire House. Glenn Bailey, who is a Liberty superstar, has been holding down Milton for several terms. But after redistricting, which happens every 10 years in New Hampshire, we now have more reps just for this area as well as Rochester Ward 5 because the shape's changed a little bit. That's a unique thing about New Hampshire is we often have more than one rep for a given area, because if it was one rep per person or one rep per area, the districts would be too small. If you have 400 people in the House, you have to share a seat, so to speak. I started in politics actually in the Libertarian Party. Back in Rochester, New York, of all places. This was a very long time ago. I believe I got involved around 2013, and I was very annoyed that it doesn't matter how many doors you knock, it doesn't matter how many shirts you sell, it doesn't matter how many petition signatures to get on the ballot you get. You're not going to win, and it's not going to matter what you do. I found that out pretty quickly. And so I left the Libertarian Party of New York and moved from Rochester, New York to Rochester, New Hampshire. And Rochester, New Hampshire is just 10 times better than Rochester, New York, at least. Probably an order of magnitude better, being serious. And stayed there for quite some time.
Free State Rochester better than the Empire State Rochester. This sounds like evil twins.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It was funny because I had my business cards. I only had to change one letter, and people from New York who move here, they often say stuff along the lines of, "I'm a refugee from the people's state of New York." That's exactly how I feel. I may have been born in New York, but I plan to die in New Hampshire because honestly, this place is just better, and I've got roots down here, and I'm going to stay here forever, as far as I can tell.
All right. So now I have two questions for you. First of all, I didn't realize that you had been an active member of the Libertarian Party and that you had campaigned for office in the Libertarian Party. And it's especially interesting to hear that because I know that when I critique on social media, some of my friends who I love very much, who are like LP partisans and kind of refuse to consider the Republican Party as a vehicle to advance liberty, you're often there like egging me on about how kind of misguided you think they are too. So I didn't realize that comes from a place of experience on your part. So that I suppose that means a whole lot more.
Yeah, I guess it rounds out. Over time, not many of my positions on actual issues has changed since I was in the LP. I still think that taxation is theft. I still don't like the Federal Reserve System. It's all basically the same. The difference is I realized that the enemy we were fighting was a lot different than what I thought the enemy was. So when I was in the LP, I had this idea that the enemy was just a little bit confused. And if we just talked to them about economics, they would come around. It turns out that's not the case. It turns out that evil is an actual tangible force and that they're doing things not because they want to do what's best, but they just don't know how. They're doing it because they actually, in a lot of cases, they do want to actually issue harm, and they just want it for the power and for the influence. Slowly coming to that conclusion, it becomes obvious that the Libertarian Party strategy has certain flaws that I believe you agree with for the most part. And I would strongly encourage people who want to get involved to, I'm not going to be partisan. I'm not going to say you have to join the GOP, but I will say join a political party where you can actually win and actually make a difference.
I do think, if you have a very kind of clear, strategy for what you're using the LP for, like, I think, I've been very impressed. And by the way, I'm going to be sitting down for lunch with Angela McCardle this week because she's here in Austin, Texas. I figured while I was in, I'd check in with her. I think what she has done to use the LP strategically as both a carrot and a stick to get concessions out of major party candidates, I think that is somewhat of a smart strategy if you're going to use a third party. But to just continuously run candidates who have no shot of winning, because as you know, like I hear it all the time. Like people say it's not fair that we live in a duopoly, and I agree it's not fair. But the rules of the game are rigged in such a manner that if you are not running in one of the two major parties, you have such an uphill. You have mountains to climb, because the fact of the matter is, like, 30% of the vote is going R no matter what. 30% of the vote is going D no matter what. And if you're running as a third party candidate, you've got to basically get every other vote that is already, that is unaccounted for. And you're starting at 1% when they're starting each at 30. So it's very difficult. And there's a reason why there's a reason why you don't see many third-party candidates winning, even if they are better on the issues, even if people agree with them more. The fact is, people are often voting against who they perceive to be the greater evil, and they will tolerate a lesser evil in order to defeat that person. And so it just always comes down to the final two choices, and we should be in the running as one of those final two. Not to get on my soapbox and keep talking about all of that. I'm preaching to the choir here. But I will also mention, I've been thinking for a while, and I've just mentioned this to you because you come from the Empire State. I've been thinking for a while, like, how nice it would be to just, like, you mentioned that you just had to change that one letter on your business cards. I keep thinking how nice it would be to, like, rent a billboard in upstate New York and just have it say, I heart New York. But just have it look like someone came and spray painted over the Y with an H, right? And it says, New Hampshire, #1 state for freedom. New York, number 50. What are you still doing here? Free state.
Just smack it on the I-90.
Empire State. What's that?
You just smack it on the I-90 and see what happens. A lot of people in Western New York, so I'm from Western New York specifically, and Western New York doesn't even have the same accent as New York City. People in Western New York are more Midwestern than they are New Yorker. And it really is like occupied territory. Yeah. Like, the SAFE Act passed years ago. Like, I think it's almost been 10 years, a little over the 10 years that the SAFE Act passed that, like, says you can't have more than 10 rounds in your magazine. You can't have certain assault weapon features on your gun. And they've been keeping their signs that say repeal the SAFE Act in their yard for a decade. And it's not been repealed yet. It's what eventually something's got to give. Is the area you live in going to change? Is it going to keep up with you with what you want? No, it's not. You got to, if it's not running away, it's running to the fight. The real fight is in New Hampshire. If you want to make liberty happen, you got to go to a place where you're actually going to be able to take a stand and win. And that's why New Hampshire's the best.
I don't know. I wonder sometimes if one of those days, like the politicians, the Manhattan politicians down in New York City, will be driving along and see one of those yard signs and have an epiphany and just realize, wow, I was wrong this whole time.
That's assuming they leave New York City. They drive the subway all over the place. They get a taxi. They're not going to go through I don't even know what the name of that tunnel is, but you got to take a tunnel out of the city.
Well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe they need to be going into the city and handing out pocket constitutions to people, and then maybe they'll read it and they'll realize, oh no, I didn't realize that liberty was a good thing. Or
it's a haul. People don't realize it's a 7-hour drive from if you go to Wyoming County, which is where I grew up, and you drive to New York City, it's like a 6-7 hour drive.
Yeah.
It's not a short drive.
And
most people have never been.
And I just want to be clear for the audience. I don't believe that the education strategy works. Certainly not on politicians. Certainly so. Handing out pocket constitutions or thinking your yard sign is going to persuade anyone is not a winning strategy. But moving to New Hampshire and concentrating with other people who share your political values to build a free society, that is a winning strategy. And folks like Representative Granger and so many others have demonstrated. I mean, you came here and now you're a second-term New Hampshire legislator, and you're helping to lead the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. And, more people should know that, like, this is a very accessible political process in New Hampshire, and come and join us and be a part of it. But let's talk about kind of the key thing that we're here today to talk about is what just happened in New Hampshire. It was a big day in New Hampshire on Election Day. I think there was a lot of nervousness about what might happen. I know that the New Hampshire House of Representatives going into Election Day, people were concerned. Republicans had something like a 4-vote majority out of 400 members, so it was very slim, right? whether you could pass a bill on any given day, depending on who was present. And there was concern that the Democrats may take back the House, which would not just be a shame for the state of New Hampshire, but I mean, the fact is the New Hampshire House of Representatives has established itself as the most libertarian political body in the entire world. So for Democrats to take that over would have been a tremendous setback for the cause of liberty everywhere. At least that's what I believe. But that's not what happened. Representative, can you tell us what happened on Tuesday?
The red wave came 2 years late. So if you guys remember in 2022, during the midterm elections, there was this supposed red wave that would come and sweep all the offices and bring Republicans into all the offices where Democrats were currently occupying. That didn't happen. And pro tip for future campaign planners, don't invent reasons for people not to show up to vote. Don't say, oh, we're going to win everything. You don't have to show up, because then they don't, because they have better things to be doing. And I did win in 2022, but there was, it depending on who resigned and whose party was in what party and how many people quit specific parties. Like we had one Liberty legislator last year who quit the GOP and decided to be an independent. And we also had other more progressive representatives that quit the Democrats. And, people, there were sort of shifting lines throughout the 2 years. But it really was, as you say, if it depended on who showed up that day. And there was another factor as well, which is that since the Republicans skewed older, that meant that they were more likely to leave early because among various reasons, when the sun goes down, they can't drive. And that's the sort of thing that you don't normally think about until you're actually communicating with them one-on-one. But if they're having a difficult time driving home after the sun goes down, then they're more likely to leave. And as soon as the Democrats have a majority, then everything comes off the table and they start passing as many anti-liberty bills as they can. And it's going to sound, and for the record, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is a nonpartisan organization. It just so happens by sheer coincidence that the worst Republican scored much better than the best Democrat on the Liberty ratings. And I'd actually, just in case people don't know, the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance is an organization that is a nonpartisan working coalition to increase individual liberty in New Hampshire. The way we go about that is by getting roll calls on bills. So we rate the bills to determine whether the bills are pro-liberty or anti-liberty. Then we get a roll call on the bills and see how people voted. And then we make a scorecard to determine who is the best, who has an A+, who's the best liberty legislator, and, who's a constitutional threat. And we publish all this information, and then we use that to endorse candidates for office and spend PAC money to help them get elected. The anti-liberty legislators are all Democrats. The best pro-liberty legislators are all Republicans. That's not a partisan point. That's just a simple statement of fact. And the very first NHLA endorsed candidate was a Democrat. For some reason, 2016, I don't know what happened in that year. Things have really gone off the rails, at least in the Democrat Party. I look forward to endorsing Democrats again once we have some pro-liberty Democrats. But in lieu of that, when you hear me say Republicans did this, you can substitute in your head pro-liberty, because 75%, if you just did, not the pro-liberty legislators, just the average Republican voted in favor of liberty 3/4 of the time. All right. Most of them actually did above that. About 3/4 of the time is what you can sort of go off of.
Now, let me ask you, though, because I know that you've told me, and the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance has said that there's 98 total liberty legislators, or what you would qualify as liberty legislator. I know that you have high standards and that some people don't make the cut, so they might be pretty good legislators on liberty, but not good enough.
Yep.
What is the benchmark? Like, is there like, I know the NHLA sends out scorecards, gives people like your kid might get on their report card, based on their performance at school. People get, anywhere from a 0 to 100, right? And I think if you're like in the F range, you're considered a constitutional threat. What grade do you need to get on the NHLA scorecard to be considered a liberty legislator?
It changes every election cycle, usually to make it more strict. This time around, so in the previous election cycles, it was 85% or above. And that was based on your last year where you were voting. I decided that if we had gone off that standard, that's 109 incumbents who would have earned an endorsement. All right. So in the year 2024, out of 200 or so Republicans, 109 of them voted with Liberty over 85% of the time. We just simply can't fund all those campaigns. We would love to have the money, by the way, nhliberty.org/donate. We would love to have the money to fund all those campaigns, but we don't. So in order to sort of focus the spending on the races where we had much more reliable pro-liberty votes, I decided that what we would do is we would average it out across the 2 years. So 2023 and 2024 would average needed to be above 85%. And that cut it down quite significantly. If then we took the people who took surveys, so those are new legislators or candidates, not legislators, who took our survey, and we screened them, and then we gave those guys an endorsement if they scored above a certain threshold on our survey, which we're going to keep proprietary. And once we have that list, we make the endorsement. So we endorsed about, if I recall correctly, 136 candidates altogether. We didn't fund every single one of their races, because some of them were just impossible, like impossible districts. Like there's no point in throwing money at an R -35 district. I thank you for showing up. Thank you for running your campaign. I hope you get some. You've got to really appreciate it.
You've got to be a good steward of your resources, because I'm sure people donate wanting to move the needle, and the district matters just as much as candidate quality.
Yeah, and so of those candidates, we had 98 that won. For the first time ever, we have 5 Liberty senators, and it was a scrap. I wasn't the political director of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance at the time, but it was a very big scrap to get one Liberty senator, and that's Senator Keith Murphy in. And that one was fraught with a little bit of drama, because unfortunately, Yakubovich, would-be Senator Yakubovich, came down with some serious illnesses and had to drop out of the race. And so Keith Murphy thankfully stepped up, and he got in, and he's doing a great job for us over there. But now we have some backup for him, which was really important, because if you only have one Liberty senator on that side of the wall, you cannot get recorded votes or a roll call vote unless you have one other senator to second the roll call motion. And if you only have one Liberty senator, that means you can't get roll calls. So we now have 5. Hopefully that means that we'll have a lot more data out of the Senate. And hopefully that means that we'll be able to effectively steer campaign resources in the Senate going forward.
So I know last year that was a big frustration with the Defend the Guard bill, which, if folks remember, this is the legislation to call home National Guard troops from wars that have not been declared by Congress, which is the right of every state to do. As the Constitution says, no matter what Pentagon officials tell you, it is the right of states to call home their National Guard troops unless Congress has given authorization for a law of the land to be enforced in a time of war, which they have not done for a very long time. And that passed the House of Representatives, but when it came to the state Senate, they wouldn't even do a roll call vote, and there were not enough Liberty senators to demand a roll call vote. And so now that will not be happening again. I imagine we will have roll call votes in both chambers on any Liberty bill that comes forward. Now, those bills passing is another question, right?
Yeah.
But at very least, we can get the politicians on the record so that they can be held accountable in election season for the votes that they take. And by my count, we have 5 Liberty senators, which is amazing. I mean, a 500% increase in Liberty senators. That's awesome. And that's 5 out of 16 of the overall 16 Republican senators, and a body of 24. So first of all, it's worth noting, right, that is a supermajority, a Republican supermajority in New Hampshire. And within that body, that's 20% of the body that is our Liberty senators. In the New Hampshire House, right, you have 222 at least Republicans. If I heard there's some recounts and things going on, things could shift a little bit, but that's a fairly strong majority. And within that 93 Liberty representatives, so that's about 23% of the body. So we're talking about folks who are like legislators who on liberty are at least a B or higher, which is a great place to be. Now, before I ask you on kind of some predictions on kind of what might happen as a result of this over the course of the next 2 years, first, I guess there's two things I want to ask you. Manchester was very interesting to watch, right? So I keep hearing two big surprises that happened in Manchester was one, the Liberty Republican candidate for the Senate won Manchester, which is Manchester, for those who don't know, it's the biggest city in New Hampshire, right? It's bigger than Portsmouth. Maybe Portsmouth is more affluent.
Correct. It's much bigger. Dover is actually bigger than Portsmouth. You wouldn't believe it, but
all right. All right. Well, I should know this, being a new resident of Dover.
Well, you're new. It's fine.
Yeah. I'm still learning my way around the Free State. So Republican wins Manchester, but not just the senator, which was a big surprise. And I saw some liberal gnashing of teeth about this. They said some kook who nobody's ever heard of. It's like, I think they think we're all kooks, but we're the ones who are winning. The people are electing us and rejecting them. So who are the kooks? And then also Kelly Ayotte, who, candidate for governor, former member of Congress, who I wouldn't say is a Liberty Republican, but maybe there's some opportunities to work with her on areas of common ground.
She has an R next to her name. And this is a tribal dynamic that some libertarians don't understand, but I'll explain it very quickly.
Yeah.
If they have an R next to their name and you also have an R next to your name, that means you're on the same team. And if you're on the same team, that means that when you provide advice or testimony or suggestions, they'll consider it. Whereas if you have a D next to your name, for instance, they won't, because you're on the other team. And she has an R next to her name. So, and all the Liberty legislators also have an R next to their name. So it's very, it doesn't mean that she'll always go with what we say, but it means that we have at least a little bit of influence.
I get the impression in New Hampshire that a lot of the establishment Republican politicians see more and more the writing on the wall, that the Liberty movement is not leaving anytime soon, and we are an increasingly large part of their partisan coalition, so they have to work with us. And I've gotten the impression from folks who've had conversations with Kelly Ayotte that she seems to recognize that. I don't imagine she's going to be very helpful on Defend the Guard, but it does seem, my impression of her time in Congress is she was fairly neoconservative, but it does sound like there is a lot of opportunity to move the needle forward further on school choice, on further cuts to spending, on making sure that we continue to phase out the interest and dividend tax. I'm particularly excited. It does seem to me, and I'd be curious for your thoughts on this if you think I'm right, that the deck is kind of stacked now for the passage of a right to work law in the state of New Hampshire, which would make it the first state in New England with a right to work law, because Kelly Ayotte is on record supporting it. It nearly came close to passing the New Hampshire House of Representatives this past go around. But the margins were so tight, you lost a few Republicans and you couldn't get across the finish line. But this time, with such a strong majority, it seems like it's almost a foregone conclusion to me. What do you think?
It's happening. So I'm on the labor committee that deals with right to work. I actually gave the floor speech of right to work in 2024. And that was a lot of fun. I thought I was going to get assassinated or have my brake lights cut or something. But right to work is coming back. It's probably going to be a year one bill this year. So that means that we're going to be seeing it this year. And with the numbers that we have, I see a very strong chance of it passing. For those who don't know what right to work is, right now, because of federal regulations, if you are working a job in a union shop, aka a company that has their workers represented by a union, you are not allowed to independently negotiate your own wages, because federal laws gave the union the right to negotiate on your behalf. And what right to work does is it means that if passed, you don't have to pay union dues to the union if you're not a member of that union. So you can't be forced to join a union, But what they do is they set up their contracts in such a way that if you are a member of, or if you're working at that company and it's a union shop, you still have to pay union dues, even if you're not a union member. And so what Right to Work does is it sort of prevents that. The best fix would be fix labor laws at the federal level. However, we don't have control over that. Yeah. So this is a good Band-Aid for the situation. It's incredibly important because the unions take money and then they tend to fund anti-liberty candidates for office.
Yeah, I think
it's a series of tubes.
I think it's an important point. And I will say also, having been the bill sponsor in the Maine Senate for several terms of Right to Work, I think that there's also a few points that are worth knowing is that the propaganda against Right to Work is they say it's an anti-union bill. And I would say that's not the case. The Right to Work states also have strong unions. The difference is that the union bosses are accountable to the union members, because if the union members do not feel that their union dues are being used in an appropriate fashion that actually advances their interests, they can leave the union and they don't have to pay union dues. So some people say, well, they can vote to change the union bosses. It's like, okay, well, we can also vote all the time to change who's stealing our money in government and how they're wasting our money. But do we feel that our money in our governmental systems are being used accountably in general? Not really. And it's the same kind of structure that they try to have with unions, where you are forced to pay in, and if you have a complaint about it, you can be one vote out of many, and have your voice for the most part ignored. But it actually is really very much in line with some of the early leaders in the union movement in America. I think of Samuel Gompers, who, for folks who know the history of the labor movement, was one of the early leaders, I believe, of the Teamsters Union. And there was this fight at the in the early 20th century about whether or not to have forced unionism or voluntary unionism. And he argued that forced unionism was contrary to every single thing the union movement, the labor movement, stood for. And he cautioned very strongly against it, because it should always be of a voluntary nature, people working together and cooperating to try to get better deals for their work. And so anyway, I'm on my soapbox about it. It's an issue I've been fighting in Maine for a decade.
Well, we'll fix it. I'm going to tell you, once we figure out what the numbers are for the committees, which we'll do after we have a speaker elected, or at least have our candidate for speaker elected, which will happen tomorrow, then we'll know what the actual committee recommendation will be. Heads up, it's going to get an OTP recommendation out of committee. Now, how will it pass on the floor? Probably. You have a 40-head majority, things happen. Will it pass the Senate? I sure hope so. I think this is probably the best year for Right to Work that we've had in the past 20 years. Easy. So We'll see how it exactly works out. We have some other good bills and runnings, though, because we got to get the Parental Bill of Rights passed. We got to get the school choice, universal EFA passed. So that's universal school choice. We got to repeal inspection stickers. That's got to cross that one off the list. I'm going to be probably sponsoring that one. And yes, we have Defend the Guard coming back. And if IAT doesn't sign it, we'll make sure that she knows that people don't like it that she didn't sign it.
All right. Anything, New Hampshire is so much further along than a lot of other states like Maine, where I'm coming from on a lot of these issues. So sometimes I wonder what's more to be done. But anything on the sound money front, I know that there's already no sales tax on gold and silver because there's no sales tax, period.
I sponsored a bill last year to make it so that wages that could be paid in gold and silver. Right now, there is a list of legal ways to pay people for work. And I find that annoying. And so I'm weighing the options. There is a sound money caucus of sorts, and I might be bringing that bill back in year 2. Because my plate's a little full right now. But there's also the option of just I kind of lean towards just repealing laws instead of adding new ones. So I tried to add gold to the list of legal ways to pay people. It failed because we didn't have the numbers that day. But if we brought it back, it might be better just to repeal that whole section of law and then just let people trade in whatever they want. Because I don't see why the government needs to be telling people in what ways they're allowed to be paid and not paid. There was also Representative Keith Ammon sponsored last year. I testified in favor of it, although I was not a sponsor, a bill to create a gold depository in the state. And it was a legal tender law. It was held for interim study. I'm not quite sure how that ended up, but we'll see exactly how it goes, because we also have some interesting things happening at the federal level, and you don't want to be too quick when the feds are acting in ways that we won't be able to know. You don't want to make decisions too rashly in that environment.
What is the deadline to put in bills? If I
November 22nd.
November 22nd, so it's coming up. All right. So
yep.
If I had an idea,
I
need to be quick. I'll have to go through like the 40 some odd bills I submitted in the Maine Senate 2 years ago and see if any of them might be a good ideas for New Hampshire, and find a good legislator to help me with that. Let me ask you, what do you think about inviting the 2nd District of Maine to break away and join New Hampshire?
I like it a lot better than I like the idea. I am not a fan of the idea of New Hampshire becoming its own country. I think that's a good way for us all to starve to death, considering that most of our food is imported. However, if CD2 of Maine wants to come to New Hampshire, I go to church in CD2.
All right.
They're nice people. All right. I like traveling through CD2. CD2 is the best part of Maine.
Oh, yeah.
If they want to join New Hampshire, I say we should be open and accept them. Now, There's a few things where I'd like the math done. So, for instance, you have doubled the size of the state at least. All right, that means
you would have, or I guess geographically, population-wise, it'd be a 50% increase.
So it'd be a 50% increase. So each district would have to have 50% more people in it, and also be at least twice the size.
Or you could have 600 representatives.
We'd have to build a new state house, and that'd be a funding bill. Hate to get all technical on your viewers, but I'm sure
if we were to do something as monumental as that, maybe there'd be Elon Musk would chip in.
I would like to increase the size of the Senate. Right now we have 400 state reps, and that's a very, very large state legislature, but we only have 24 senators. And I like the idea. I get it. The point of a bicameral legislature is to have like a smaller legislature that can, be a little bit more focused, and then a larger legislature, yada, yada. Okay. But I think 24 is a little too small. I think a good compromise is 36 instead of 48, instead of just doubling it. And if we were to include Maine, we would definitely need to increase the size, because if that didn't happen, if you didn't increase the size of the Senate, then each Senate district would just be too big.
Yeah.
And then that would attract everybody who in that entire area, socioeconomic factors, all that jazz. The Senate would be an even less tameable beast. But it's something worth thinking about. It's not something that we should say no. It's something we should think about first.
Yeah, it's just starting a conversation, right?
Yes.
We can.
And that's what a bill is. A bill, until it hits the floor, until it gets signed into law, it's just a conversation.
Yeah. Well, I know that my friends in Maine are not too happy right now, because Republicans made some gains in the House and the Senate, but they came just short of reclaiming the majority in the House of Representatives. And so that means that Democrats in Maine continue to have a trifecta for a fourth straight term with the governor, the House, the Senate. They continue ramming through gun control. They continue stripping away people's medical freedoms by eliminating the religious and philosophical exemptions for vaccines. They continue to hike taxes. They passed the largest payroll tax hike in Maine history just this past year. It's just on and on and on. And so many of the folks of the 2nd District of Maine it's just like people don't recognize their state anymore. And I will tell you that.
Is it almost tied in Maine?
Almost tied.
So they're just like back by like 1 or 2 votes.
Yeah, they're just a few votes shy in the 150 member House of Representatives of a majority. They gained seats from where they were, but just not enough. They fell just a little bit short. And
if it's close to a tie, I would like to give a little bit of advice to them. Cause division within the ranks of the opposition. If you can get them to fight each other, they will break ranks like crazy, and then you can rule the day.
Yeah. Divide and conquer, just like the power brokers in Washington, D.C. do it all the rest of us. They get us to fight about all these social issues while they print trillions of dollars out of thin air and launch wars in like many different countries. And and get us distracted fighting each other on I don't know who can use what bathroom, right? They love it when we fight over that, so we don't pay attention to what else they're doing. And it's effective. So hey, divide and conquer. It's a tale as old as time. Any other predictions you have? Like, I guess in the grand scheme of things, what do you think this election means for New Hampshire in the long term? So I'm not talking about just like the next 2 years. I'm talking about, like, I'm seeing messages like posted on social media from like exasperated Democrats who are losing hope that they'll ever be able to turn New Hampshire around. Just like so many people in
you
Maine
shouldn't get me excited
that they will ever be able to turn Maine around. What do you think this means in the long term for New Hampshire?
There's recent studies have indicated that of all the states that went blue at the federal level, New Hampshire is one of only a very small few where the more Republicans have moved to the state than have left. In most of the states, more Democrats are moving in than Republicans. In the case of New Hampshire, more Republicans are moving in. I hope that this will exacerbate that trend. I believe that it is very likely that if Democrats, as a trend, move out, then we'll be able to make some changes. I think that the majority that we have will allow certain election law bills to pass that will help fight back the unfavorable effect of college students, for instance.
Yeah, I've heard the possibility of a law that if you are paying out-of-state tuition, you're not eligible to vote in New Hampshire. You have to vote absentee where you actually live. I heard that's a possibility. Are there any other proposals you think might be coming forward there?
I don't follow election law too closely on the grounds that election law is by far the most partisan committee in the state house. And it's not even close. There's like no one in second place other than maybe finance.
Yeah.
So maybe education committee. But there's a lot of changes that are likely to be made this year and next year that just sort of rig the game in favor of liberty. And if we can do that, then we can set a trend, because this will only be a 2-year term. All right. But we're going to still be living here for decades. All right. Yeah. So that means that we need to get the wins we can while we can, sure, but also set things up for more victory down the road. You can win the battle, but you also need to focus on the overall war.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's very encouraging. I think it's absolutely clear beyond a reasonable doubt that New Hampshire is the liberty capital of New England. No, 100%. I mean, other states might try to claim the title of free state. You know, Florida says they're a free state. They're number 2 on the rankings, by the way, after New Hampshire. I mean, all right, I guess they're close enough. I won't begrudge them too much. I saw Colorado. It's a good place to visit.
You know, you don't lose liberty points for visiting Florida on vacation. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I heard Colorado. The governor of Colorado says the free state of Colorado. Give me a break. Maybe at one point, but not the direction they're going.
Trying to steal the branding.
Yeah. But certainly no one in New England can claim that title, but except for New Hampshire. And let me ask you too, because I know a lot of people just see that Trump lost New Hampshire, and now he lost it by like 2 points. It was much closer than anyone predicted. And from what I saw, the Trump campaign didn't even really make an effort in New Hampshire until some polling came out at the very end suggesting it was a toss-up, and then they JD Vance to do a rally. What's that?
Yeah, so JD Vance, I went to a JD Vance rally like a few days before the election, and that was very interesting. They just a poll came out that showed that New Hampshire was a swing state all of a sudden.
Yeah,
we did lose all the federal races. Trump won nationally, but we do have 2 Democrat congressmen and Congress critters. That does not have any impact on the state races. The state races, we have a Republican governor, a Republican House, and a Republican Senate. This is a purple state. We'll see if that changes in the future. It would be nice to have some liberty representatives in Congress. That's not what we have right now, but we were mostly focused on the state.
Let me ask you though. One thing. Well, first of all, it does always seem to me that change happens gradually and from the bottom up. And so it does seem to me that if things continue going the way that they're going in New Hampshire, with such a deep bench of liberty leaders in the legislature, I mean, 98 across the House and the Senate. And all of these are folks who could potentially be future congressmen or future U.S. senators. And it does seem to me like those U.S. Senate seats and U.S. congressional seats are in play over the course of the next decade. And that anyone who might be watching with some deep cash who wants to get a libertarian into the U.S. Senate, like New Hampshire is a great state to invest in. I think these are in play over the course of the next decade with the victories that we saw this past week. But also, let me ask you, and I know we are going to be approaching the end of the hour very quickly, so we don't have too much time, but why do you think this happens, this kind of things going blue on the federal level, but so red on the local level, on the state level? Is it just that there's like this core swing vote of people who prefer federal Democrats for some reason, but on the state level they're voting Republican? Is that it? And if so, I'm trying to understand the mind of that person.
I think the biggest influence is property taxes.
Yeah.
They know that if they vote for a Republican in New Hampshire, that'll reduce that's more likely to reduce their property taxes. And they may support Democrat policies at the federal level, but split ticket voting is very common in New Hampshire. People will go boop, 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 all the way down the ballot because they'll choose the people who they like the most, not necessarily the people who are in the party that they like the most. And it's very important that when so for instance, if you're door knocking for a federal candidate, make sure you tell people to go down ballot as well, especially if you have Liberty people in that district, because otherwise they're perfectly happy to go back and forth, and they know that it's not gonna cost them anything. They can vote for whoever they want. So you have to give them a reason to vote down ballot.
All right. Well, a great election night. I'm looking forward to the next 2 years. I'm so honored to be joining you and everyone else in New Hampshire and to have cast my first ballot in New Hampshire. I'm looking forward to getting involved, of course, in my personal capacity, not as the executive director of the Free State Project, in the legislative process. I'm sure I'm going to be coming to testify on some bills, and I want to get involved with the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance. So I'm looking forward to that. And any final words you want to share with our audience before we close out?
Yes, if people want to help out the mission of the New Hampshire Liberty Alliance and get Liberty legislators elected, we are a nonpartisan organization that includes Democrats, even though I'm mostly talking about Republicans today. You can go to nhliberty.org/donate. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Granger4NH, at Granger4NH, and you can follow me on Twitter.
All right. Awesome. Representative
Thanks for
Granger,
having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me on the Porcupine Report. All right, everyone, that's the show. Thank you for joining us on, I think we're calling this part 2 of What Just Happened. So this is the What Just Happened in New Hampshire. I really appreciate Michael Granger joining us. Appreciate you for joining us. A few other things to note. As I mentioned at the start of the show, we are in fundraising season for the Free State Project. All donations you make to the Free State Project are tax deductible. We are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And your donations today is going to help us invest in new initiatives and our efforts for next year, including recruiting builders, people who want to come and build a free society here in New Hampshire. I guess here in New Hampshire. I'm in Texas right now as I record this. So up there in New Hampshire. So help us recruit builders, grow community, and also brand the Free State in the minds of all who love liberty as the place they need to come and at very least visit and maybe fall in love with and then stay for a lifetime. So you can do that at fsp.org. And while you're there, while you're making your most generous donation, which of course will be matched dollar for dollar. Thank you to our significant donor who came in and put up matching funds. Will be matched dollar for dollar. While you're doing that, go to our community calendar. Check out all the events that are going on almost every single day in New Hampshire. If you're fortunate enough to be here, you don't want to miss out. And I will look forward to seeing you there. Once I get back from Texas, of course, I'll be back for a couple of days next week. And then I've got to turn around and fly to Tennessee for the Young Americans for Liberty Hazlitt Coalition's their conference of state legislators, now over 400 across the country. Boy, when I got started in the state Senate in 2014, if you were to count up all the liberty legislators in America, maybe there were 24. Maybe there were 24. Now there's over 420. How times change. The revolution will not be televised because it's happening in the state capitals. And the TV screens only care about what's happening in the circus in Washington, D.C. But in the state capitals, we are winning ground for liberty. Every single election cycle, we go further and further. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to our technical producer, Renita, for running everything behind the scenes. And furthermore, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.